Chapter 2. This venerable one lives. My heart had already stilled, and my thoughts turned to ash. Yet unexpectedly, the light of spring shines through the cold night. Could it be that the heavens pity the blade of grass in this secluded valley? Yet I fear only that the world is unpredictable and full of hardships. A woman's crisp voice passed by his ear, poetic verses rolling like pearls and jade, but all they did was make Moran's head throb, the vein by his brow twitching madly. With all the noise, where did this wailing banshee even come from? Servants, kick this bitch off the mountain! Only after bellowing so did Moran realize with a start that something wasn't right. And he died. Hatred and coldness, pain and loneliness stabbed at his chest. Moran's eyes flew open. Everything that had happened right before his death scattered like snow in the wind. He found himself lying on a bed. Not the bed at Xishang Peak, but a bed carved with a dragon and phoenix, the wood smelling heavily of powder. The old quilt was colored pink and purple, embroidered with mandarin ducks, the kind of bed one would only find in a whorehouse. Moran froze. Knew where this was. This was the entertainment district near Xishang Peak. So-called entertainment district just meant brothel. Easy come, easy go. Moran had a period of debauchery in his youth, and had spent the greater portion of half a month at this establishment. But this place had been sold and converted into a wine shop when he was 20-something. How did he end up here of all places after death? Had he transgressed too much in life, wronged too many people, and so the king of the underworld was punishing him to reincarnate into a whorehouse and take customers? Moran turned over as his imagination ran wild, and unexpectedly came face to face with a slumbering person. Oh, why was there a person next to him? A man, totally naked. He was lovely and pleasing to the eye, and quite androgynous. Moran showed no expression, but his heart was full of turmoil. He stared at that pretty boy's face for a while and suddenly remembered. Wasn't this the boy toy he doted on when he was young? Named Rong San? Or was it Rong Jiu? It didn't matter if it was San or Jiu. What mattered was, this prostitute got an STD and died years ago. Even his bones should have rotted away by now. Yet here he was, delicately curled by his side, neck and shoulders dotted with blue and purple, full of love bites. San or Jiu. But that's, yeah, wrong, and then either the third child or the ninth child. Moran pulled a long face, lifted the quilt, and peeked downwards. This wrong someone. Don't know if he's Jiu or San. Let's call it a Rong Jiu. Rong Jiu's pretty little body was covered in rope burns, and his pale, tender thighs were still tied intricately with red rope. Moran stroked his chin. How interesting. Look at this exquisite rope art, the skilled technique, the familiar scene. Didn't he fucking do this himself? As a cultivator, he'd read about the concept of rebirth. He began to suspect that he'd somehow gone back in time. To confirm his suspicions, Moran found a copper mirror. The mirror was worn, but good enough to vaguely make out his appearance. Moran had been 32 when he died, but the face in the mirror was quite young. It was a charming face, exuding a youthful arrogance, looking no more than 15 or 16. Huh. There was no one else in the room. Thus, the once cruel ruler of the cultivation world, evil tyrant of Bashu, emperor of the mortal realm, lord of Xishang Peak, Paxian Jun Moran himself, after much consideration expressed his thoughts honestly. Fuck. The sleeping Rong Jiu got fucked. Awake? The pretty thing sat up languidly, the thin quilt sliding off his shoulder to reveal an expanse of pale skin. He gathered his long soft hair and, lifting his peach blossom eyes, smudged with red ink, he yawned. Oh, Gongzu, you're up early today. Moran did not respond. Back then, he had indeed liked Rong Jiu's type, delicate and androgynous. But now, the 32-year-old Taxian Jun couldn't figure out what the hell he'd been thinking to find this kind of man attractive. Did you not sleep well last night? Nightmare? The venerable one fucking died. How about that for a nightmare? Rong Jiu thought his continued silence was because he was in a bad mood, so he slipped off the bed to stand before the carved window, wrapping his arms around Moran from behind. Oh, Gongzu, pay attention to me. What are you spacing out for? Moran's face turned blue at his embrace. He wanted nothing more than to rip this hussy off of himself and grant that fragile-looking face some 17-18 slaps, but managed to suppress the urge. He still felt a bit dizzy and uncertain on the situation. After all, if he'd really been reborn, then he couldn't just beat Rongjiu up out of the blue after spending the previous day all lovey-dovey with him. It would make it seem like he'd lost his marbles. Definitely couldn't have that. Moran arranged his expression, putting on a pretense of forgetfulness. What day is it? Rongjiu stared for a second, then smiled. 4th of May. 33rd year. That was last year. It's the 34th year now. They do say that great men tend to be forgetful. The 34th year. The gears in Moran's head turned rapidly. That year he turned 16 and had just been identified as the Xishan Peak's leader's long-lost nephew, transforming from a pathetic bullied dog to a phoenix on the branch oversight. So then, he really had been reborn. Or was it just a hollow dream in death? Rongjiu smiled. Mo Gongzu is so hungry he doesn't even remember the date anymore. Wait here a moment. I'll go fetch some food. How does fried pancake sound? Moran had just been reborn and wasn't sure how to deal with all of this yet. But it should be fine if he just followed the same approach as before. So he thought back to his charismatic style back then and, suppressing his disgust, playfully pinched Rongjiu's thigh. Sounds delicious. I want congee too, and I want you to feed me. Rongjiu pulled on some clothes and left, soon returning with a tray carrying a bowl of pumpkin congee, 2 Yoshan pastries, and a plate of side dishes. Moran happened to be a bit hungry and was about to dig into the pastries when Rongjiu brushed his hand away. Allow me to serve, Gongzi. Rongjiu picked up a pancake and sat on Moran's lap. He wore nothing but a thin robe, legs spread wide open and flush against Moran, even rubbing against him now and again without subtlety. Moran stared at his face. Rongjiu thought he was getting horny again. What are you staring at me for? The food's going to get cold. Moran was silent for a moment, remembering his good deed Rongjiu had done behind his back in his previous lifetime. The corners of his lips curved into a sweet smile. He, the great Taxian Jun, was no stranger to disgusting acts. As long as he felt like it, there was nothing too disgusting for him to do. This right now was merely putting on a show, mere child's play. Moran casually leaned back against the chair, smiling. Sit. I'm already sitting. You know where I'm telling you sit. Rongjiu blushed. Why the rush? How about Gongzu finishes eating for... Before he could even finish, Moran pulled him forward and pressed him back down. Rongjiu's hand shook and knocked over the bowl of congee. He managed between gasps. Mo Gongzu, the bowl. Doesn't matter. But you should still eat for... Aren't I eating right now? Moran held onto his waist. The side of Rongjiu's extended neck and lovely visage reflected in his pitch-black pupils. In his previous lifetime, he'd liked to kiss those captivating red lips during intimacy. After all, Rongjiu was pretty and knew just the right words to say. It would be a lie to say that Moran had never felt anything for him. But now that Moran knew what these lips had done behind his back, he found them unbearably foul and definitely had no interest in kissing them. The 32-year-old Moran was different from the 16-year-old Moran in many aspects. For example, the 16-year-old him still knew gentleness and love and intimacy. However, the 32-year-old him had only violence left. Afterwards, looking at Rongjiu, who had passed out from getting fucked to within an inch of his life, his tumultuous eyes curved faintly, even carrying a hint of a faint smile. He was very good looking when he smiled. Eyes a deep, rich black with a sheen of arrogant purple from certain angles. God damn, he's sexy. Right now, he dragged Rongjiu onto the bed by his hair and casually picked up a shard of the broken bowl from the ground, holding it to Rongjiu's face. He had always avenged every grievance. Right now was no difference. Thinking about how much he had taken care of Rongjiu and his business in the last lifetime, how he'd thought about buying his freedom, and how Rongjiu had paid him back by scheming against him with others, his eyes couldn't help but curve into a smile as he pressed the shard against Rongjiu's cheek. This person's body was his business. Without this face, he would have nothing. He would be forced to wander the streets like a dog, to crawl on the ground, get kicked, and suffer all kinds of spurn and abuse. He was so delighted by the mere thought that even the disgust he felt from fucking this person just now vanished like smoke. Moran's smile became even more lovely. Just a tad of pressure, and a thread of blood captivatingly red seeped out. The unconscious person seemed to have felt the pain and groaned softly in a hoarse voice, looking quite pitiful with tears still clinging to his eyelashes. Moran's hand suddenly stopped. He remembered a dear friend. Then he suddenly realized what he was in the middle of doing. It took a few seconds of him being in a daze before he finally, slowly, lowered his hand. He had done so much evil that it had become habitual. He even forgot that he had been reborn. Right now, everything had yet to happen. The irrevocable mistakes had not yet been committed, and that person still lived. There was no need to walk the same cruel path. He could do it over. He sat down and propped his foot on the bed, absent-mindedly toying with a piece of broken porcelain in his hand. Suddenly noticing the oily pancake that still sat on the table, he grabbed it, peeled off the wax paper, and tore into it with his teeth, eating until crumbs flew everywhere and his lips got shiny with grease. The pancake was this brother's specialty. It was nothing special, especially compared to the delicacies he'd tasted later on. But ever since his place had gone bankrupt, Moran never got to eat it again. Now the familiar taste of the pancake, through the turbulent events of the past, once again returned to the tip of his tongue. The unreal feeling of rebirth lessened with every swallow. By the time he finished the pancake, he finally woke up from the stupor he'd been in this whole time. He really had been reborn. Everything hateful in his life, everything that he couldn't take back, all of it had not yet come to pass. He had not yet killed his uncle and aunt, not yet razed 72 cities to the ground, not yet betrayed his teacher and ancestors, not yet gotten married, not yet... No one had died yet. He savored the taste in his mouth, licking along his teeth, and feeling the thread of joy in his chest ballooning rapidly into a kind of feverish excitement. He'd rebuked heaven and earth in his last life. Dipping into all three of the forbidden techniques of the human realm, he had mastered each of the other two. Only the last one, rebirth, had eluded him regardless of his talent. Unexpectedly, that which he had failed to obtain in life fell effortlessly into his lap in death. All the distaste, the repugnance, the desolation, the loneliness, all of his complicated feelings from his previous life were locked in his chest. The sight of the army marching on Xishang Peak, fire lit for 10,000 fathoms, still remained in his mind. That time he had really not wanted to live anymore. The people all said that his very existence cursed all who came close to him, that he was fated to die alone. Everyone had turned their backs on him. Toward the end, even he himself had felt like the walking dead. Senseless, lonesome. He didn't know what had gone wrong and where. For an irredeemable wicked person like him to get the chance to redo everything and ending his own life. Why destroy Rongjio's face over such a measly grudge from so long ago? Rongjio loved money. He would just not pay this time and take some silver on top to teach him a lesson. As for his life, he didn't want that burden just yet. I'm letting you off easy, Rongjio, Moran said with a smile, tossing the porcelain shard out the window. Then he emptied out Rongjio's jewels and valuables, tucking all of it into his pouch. He took his time dressing and arranging himself before leisurely strolling out of the place. Uncle, aunt, cousin Xuemeng, Shizun, and... Moran's eyes softened at the thought of that person. Sugar, I'm coming. Oh, author's notes. The story ship is Moran x Shizun. There is no White Lotus Shigur. Do not board the wrong ship.